Okay, good afternoon again, everyone. We seem to have a good number of participants at this point, so I think we want to get started. Welcome to this listening session on the current iteration of the Stretch Energy Code and Specialized Energy Code here in Massachusetts. We will just run through some slides very quickly by way of introduction. And then we have roughly 50 people signed up to give comments so far. Once we get through the folks that have signed up already, there will be additional chances to speak. But we will be restricting time in order for everybody to have an opportunity. I just want to start out by flagging some resources that many, if not all of you, will already be aware of, but we continue to use these resources and hope that you're finding them useful or be interested in comments on them. So first of all, the DOER website, we're continuing to use the Stretch Energy Code Development 2022 page, which was where this all started with public comments back in spring of 2022. There's new information there, including information on this listening session, so hopefully you're familiar with that. We continue to take and respond to emails sent to us at the stretchcode@mass.gov email, and our partners at MassSave have continued to put out training, technical assistance, and support materials like checklists on the MassSave website that's linked on this page here as well. So hopefully you are familiar with these resources and finding them helpful, but we would appreciate any comments on those resources. I want to hand it over now to my colleague Paul Almond, just to talk about the technical guidance that's on that website and a couple of other things. So Paul, over to you.
Great, hopefully everyone can hear me. The link there at the top of the slide brings you to the part of the website that contains our technical guidance and other materials. So a few things to look out for if you haven't seen them is the Stretch and Specialized Code guidelines. So there's a guideline guide that has, the main body has a lot of information about how to interpret the code. And then there's several attachments to that. So attachment A is information about doing the thermal bridge derating. B is the guidelines for ASHRAE compliance when that's being used. C is guidelines for TEDI modeling. And then also in that same folder is schedule and load information that is designed for the TEDI modeling, and the weather file information also designed for the TEDI modeling. And then on the same website, if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, there's a Stretch Energy Code study report. And that's a huge report with a bunch of appendices on costs, analyses, results, case studies, and things of that nature that might be useful to you. And then in addition, there are pre-built models for a bunch of different building types that conform to the TEDI requirements. And those are, I think, a helpful, useful resource for folks to examine or maybe start with in order to make sure that your TEDI modeling is complying with the guidelines. Would you go to the next slide? There are trainings that are in place. These are provided by through MassSave with PSD and Cartman Associates. So just three that there's a lot of different training. I just wanted to point out three different kinds that might be relevant for commercial code users. In particular, there's the Stretch Energy Code, TEDI and ASHRAE Appendix G training. That's 4 hours. It's meant for code officials and modelers. There's also a more detailed training that's 8 hours for TEDI and ASHRAE modeling, designed for modelers for much more detailed review. And then there's a compliance documentation training for Teddy and ASHRAE Appendix G, 2 hours for code officials and modelers as well. And that's it for me.
Okay, so I want to go over how we're planning to handle this listening session today. Because of the number of participants that we have signed up, we had to do this as a webinar. And so you won't get to see yourself on the screen, but we will unmute folks in order of speaking and allow you to speak. We ask that you limit any comments today to 3 minutes, just for the simple math of we have a 3-hour allocation for this meeting, and so we can take about 60 people if everybody takes the full 3 minutes. If people are more concise, we can get through more people if there are more comments requested. If we run out of time today, we will end at 5 o'clock, but we can consider having further listening sessions. And everybody is welcome and encouraged to submit written comments by 5 o'clock next Wednesday, April 3rd. And those comments should be sent by email to stretchcode@mass.gov, or you'll see on our website, you can mail them a physical copy to us if you prefer. Once we receive written comments, they will be reviewed and posted to the DOER website. The comments made today will be recorded. This session is being recorded. That's so that we can go back and review and re-listen to what was said. We are not posting a recording of this listening session. So with that, I think we can move into the session itself. Just to give folks a chance to get ready, I'm going to read out the first 5 people that we have lined up for this listening session. And then we'll do that going forward in batches of 5. And if I can make it work, I will put a timer on the screen showing your 3 minutes. So once you are off mute, we can do that, just so you're not surprised by that. So the first 5 speakers that I have are Kevin Ring, then Lisa Cunningham, then Katie Raymond, then Jim Blake, and then Alex Balmas. Apologies for any mispronunciations. If folks are not online when we get to you, then we will move folks to the back of the line and just continue through the list. So if we have Kevin Ring available, we can get started.
Is Kevin able to unmute himself?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Kevin.
I'm surprised. I didn't intend to register to speak, so I prefer to pass.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome to pass. The next up would be Lisa Cunningham. And if you raise your hand, then yeah, it's easier for us to unmute you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Lisa. Go ahead.
Great, thanks so much. Good morning. My name is Lisa Cunningham, and I'm a co-founder of the nonprofit Zero Carbon MA. I'm also an architect in residential practice, doing a lot of work decarbonizing residential homes. And I actually haven't prepared remarks for today. I will submit some written comments, but I just really wanted to give a big shout out to you guys and the work that you're doing to move decarbonization forward in Massachusetts. And basically all the hard work that you have been doing, and also encourage DOER to go further. I think we have a restricted, as you know, 10 community fossil fuel free demonstration program, but originally the specialized code was supposed to be all electric and fossil fuel free, and I think we need to go further and faster. I think the incredible adoption of the specialized code, 32 communities representing over 26% of the state's population in about a year, is really amazing, and also a tribute to the hard work that you both and your team have done. So I'll stop my remarks at there, and thanks so much.
Okay, thank you for that. That gave us a chance to try out the timer. Okay, next up we have Katie Raymond.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thanks, Ian. I hate to also pass the buck, but Epsilon has worked with several of our architecture and engineering partners to develop comments for this forum. So I'm going to actually defer to their expertise in asking those questions. And if there's anything at the end that we didn't, that wasn't covered, I'll circle back with my hand up. But in the meantime, I will yield my time back to the group. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Next up we have Jim Blake. Do we see a Jim Blake? Hey, Jim, I took you off mute.
Yep, there. Is that coming through now?
Yep.
Great. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I did not realize I'd signed up to speak, but one, I think that it's still very important as we move forward. We continue to look at having a balanced approach to the decarbonization process in the energy code. We are finding some difficulty with the amount of electricity that's coming in to the state right now. The carbon intensity of our electric grid is still higher than products like propane, which have a lower carbon intensity and currently have a higher HERS rating to meet or lower, as the case may be, in the code. And I believe we should still have a balance there so that we could accelerate decarbonization by using these other technologies. And I can say that I've also heard from a number of trade groups and some of the unions that they feel that this is creating a bit of a burden on the scope of work and things they can do. That's all of my comments today. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Jim. And that's a good reminder that if you are representing an organization, if you're willing to state your organization at the start of your comments, I believe like Lisa and Katie did that, then that is very helpful. Okay, so moving on, we have Alex Barmas. Or maybe it's Alexander Barmas.
Sorry, I actually don't have anything prepared at the moment. I'll cede my time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read out the next 5 people that signed up to speak, starting with Kate Babrisky, then Bill Talbot, then David Mensa, then Scott Greenbaum, and then Scott Tomlinson. So we'll start there with Kate Babrisky. I'm sure I got that wrong, but Kate, if you're ready, you're unmuted.
Yep, you can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Kate Babrisky, and I'm a registered architect in Massachusetts. I am here today to provide comments on behalf of AIA Massachusetts, of which I am currently a board member. AIA Massachusetts represents over 5,000 architects, design professionals, and allied members statewide. We have been actively involved with developing the Commonwealth's response to climate issues, and we support the role of energy codes in achieving state decarbonization goals. From November last year to early January this year, AIA Massachusetts conducted a survey of its members and their architecture firms to ascertain their ability, since the codes went into effect, to effectively implement the new specialized code and updated stretch code, determine if there were challenges to implementation, as well as identify resources to alleviate any challenges found. Survey responses represented the full breadth of firm sizes, building types, and building scales across the state, including low-rise residential and commercial projects under the stretch and specialized energy codes. The survey found 67% of responders could not effectively implement the current energy codes. The majority of respondents reported that implementing the codes was moderately to very challenging across all building types and uses and across all compliance pathways. Responders have experienced project delays, cancellations, and existing building restrictions, including existing buildings not being reused. AIA Massachusetts will share the survey results with DOER through written commentary. The organization hopes to work with DOER to address some of the immediate needs and challenges, such as code language clarification, technical guidance, compiled code documents, compliance documentation, and clear process for DOER support and timely responses. We also hope to work with other aligned organizations outside of DOER to implement trainings and resources for design practitioners, contractors, and owners. Our hope is that we can overcome the challenges that have been experienced in the last year and that we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Kate. Okay, next up we have Bill Talbot. I don't see Bill in the attendees list unless, Bill, you're on the phone. I'm wondering if you can raise your hand if you are on. Okay, we might have to loop back on Bill Talbot. Next in the list is David Mensa.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, great. I don't exactly have prepared comments, but I'll give you a little bit of feedback just on what we've experienced on our end in implementing the new code. I'm going to limit my comments primarily just to the thermal envelope derating portion of the code, because that's where we've, as architects, have spent most of our time. I should mention I'm with Dorn Whittier Architects. The thermal derating process has been very challenging, not just for us, but also for other firms that we've worked with, because of the 3 compliance paths that are provided, none of which make it terribly easy for architects to effectively design. It's an okay way to sort of document what exists, but it's not a very good design tool by a long stretch, because it takes so much energy investment in calculating what the actual derated performance of your vertical assemblies might be. The prescriptive pathway seems to be very restrictive, to the point where it's effectively a straw man that forces users to either use the reference compliance path or the modeled compliance path. The modeled compliance path can be very financially troublesome for project teams. I got a quote on a recent project that was north of $100,000 to model all of the necessary details, right? Because you've got 7 or 8 different detail conditions for a given wall type. So if you've got 4 wall types, that's 28 details that need to be modeled. So you're kind of guided towards the referenced compliance pathway. A lot of the details in the BC Hydro Manual are just not compatible with the way that we build buildings in Massachusetts. For example, the Chapter 5 on metal framed building systems has no parapet detail with a metal roof deck. They're all concrete decks, but metal roof decks are used extensively in Massachusetts. There's no triple glazed curtain wall, base of wall detail, for example. So there's a whole host of things that aren't in the manual, which means that we really just have to use best professional judgment in determining how to use the reference manual to approximate linear thermal transmittance for a range of different conditions. I know that the technical guidance says that the exact materials and configurations must be used. This just isn't feasible for the way that buildings are designed, and actually could be considered contradictory to public procurement laws that require you to use non-proprietary assemblies and systems like that. So that's close to my 3 minutes. I just wanted to sort of give you guys some feedback that I think the technical guidance should be revised to possibly incorporate more input from practicing professionals who have implemented what the code is to date, and might have some good feedback as to how to tune it to make it more useful.
Okay, thank you, David. Next, we have Scott Greenbaum.
Hi, Ian and Paul. My name's Scott Greenbaum, Green Energy Consultants, LLC. We're a consulting engineering firm in doing energy conservation and commissioning. I'm also a PE, a certified passive house consultant, green building engineer, and a certified energy manager, and also a certified building commissioning professional. My first thing I have to say, Ian, since 2022, when I first saw the proposed stretch codes that you've made a lot of progress. It's much better than it was and will produce better buildings, but it does not meet the presentation that I saw at BE24 that is going to crush the heating loads. The first place that I want to talk about is the high percentage glass exterior walls, essentially the all glass buildings that are typical in most of downtown Boston now, in most buildings. Actually, I am commissioning a building with triple glazed glass that will meet the performance standard, and it is uncomfortable in front of those windows. And that's with triple glazed glass. 25-degree day, partly sunny, sun's out, it's hot. Sun goes away, it's cold. If you don't have a shell on a building, you're not going to get heating performance. I also have just picked up a client in the Seaport area, all glass residential building, built 5 years ago. My house, built in 1953, that is partially weatherized, uses 1/2 the energy it uses to heat. You're not going to get there that way. The confidence level in modeling is plus or minus 25% at best. I've been doing modeling since 1978. I've seen almost 0 buildings perform better than the model. Even being 25% off is a rarity. It's usually 50 to 100% off. There is a lot, you need to overshoot so that you can get to where you want to go, because you're going to end up short in the end. The other thing you have to take into account is that the shells are going to depreciate over 50 years or over 25 years by 2050. So it's not going to perform the way the model says, and the model doesn't take in all the variables that make that exist in the real world. biggest one is tenant comfort. And when tenants are uncomfortable, buildings are inefficient. I think that covers all my time. So that's my basic comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Scott. And as a reminder to everyone, please submit written comments as well that we will read. Okay, next up is another Scott, Scott Tomlinson.
Hey guys, how you doing? I didn't know I have anything prepared myself. But a couple of the challenges that we've been facing, we're MEP engineers. A couple of the challenges we've been facing with the new codes is applying them in terms of change of use of occupancy and how that's related to it being an alteration or new construction. Another thing that kind of factors into that is looking to reduce energy consumption in a building when you're adding a system that the building didn't have in the past. So a lot of what we're doing is going into the buildings, we're upgrading the ventilation in the buildings, but we're adding cooling to the buildings, which I think we've been lucky so far that with the envelope improvements we've been adding, we have been seeing some reductions of energy, even though we're adding cooling. And I think we had an interpretation from the DOER that says when you're adding a system to a building, you don't necessarily need to look back at what the building was doing. You have to more do of a like-for-like comparison of a building that has cooling. So we have had a interpretation on that that's been working out for us. The other thing that we're having a challenge with is working on facilities that are a campus as opposed to a singular building. So some buildings we're working on, we're getting central steam or hot water or chilled water from a central plant. We're doing a building renovation, so a lot of the efficiencies aren't applying because the heating, cooling is being generated at a central plant. The other side of that is if we're looking at providing a new central plant and we have to be in compliance with new stretch code, it's looking at our interpretation is it's looking at the systems inside the building as part of the building, and all those systems have to meet the requirements of stretch code in terms of the decarbonization efficiencies, even though that those systems are feeding other buildings on campus. It's kind of just a quick summary of the challenges that we've been seeing trying to implement the new codes.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Okay, so we're on to our next block of 5 speakers, starting with Alberto Franchette, if I got that right, then Scott Hall, then Brian Spangler, then Paul Martin, and then James Anderson. So first in that list is Alberto. I don't see you in the list though. So why don't we circle back on Alberto and go to Scott Hall?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
This is Scott Hall with Radco. We're a third-party modular review company, and I'm trying to figure out how to apply the stretch code to what we do. I review the plans for approval for structural design by the PE, the designer, and I make sure it meets code. But with the stretch code, I assume our manufacturer is going to have to hire someone who can do the stretch code for analysis of the building. But who's going to do the review of the calculations and make sure they're correct? It's a third party, and we inspect the construction of the building after it's been designed. And it's going to have to be inspected by an inspector during construction to make sure the stretch code is met during construction on what you guys do. Do you know how that works for your program for modular buildings? Did you hear me?
Yeah, you were a little faint, but I think we got that. We can't answer questions today during this listening session, but you can submit questions to the stretchcode@mass.gov email.
Okay, that helps.
Do do you have any other comments?
No, I'm just trying to figure out how to apply it to what I do for a living, and no one has any information for me as of yet.
Yep, understood. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up was Brian Spangler.
Yes, hi. Apologize, but I'm just listening in today. Thank you.
Yep, that is quite all right. Thank you, Brian. Okay, next up is Paul Martin.
Hello,
Hello.
it's Paul Martin, building official. We're finding it very hard to implement a lot of these changes so quickly and educate ourselves and educate the contractors. It's just impossible. It just was kind of thrown down our throats very quickly, and we just didn't have enough time to get people on board. I guess we're looking for more training for building officials and enough to put it out there for the contractors as well, because they're losing jobs on this. We have the contractors coming in who are saying that homeowners think they're ripping them off because it's 30 grand more to do a job because of this. That wasn't figured, but that's about all the comments I have.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Yeah, feel free to provide written comments as well if you'd like. Okay, next up is James Anderson.
He's not speaking. Yes.
James, are you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. One of the challenges with the energy code has been on existing buildings. There's a lot of confusion out in the construction industry as well as on our end when it comes to substantial renovation, particularly when it comes to an addition over 1,000 square feet, where not only do you have to have the HERS rating, but on the addition, but it's also for the existing house. Or if the work exceeds 50% of the existing house. The energy code has always been, and the ICC has always been kind of work performed when it comes to an existing building. Anything new would have to comply, but they had a lot more grace involved with the existing house. In Quincy, we have a lot of houses that are very old. And my personal opinion is when it comes to existing buildings, we need to relook at how we're making existing buildings try to comply with today's standards. It's very difficult, very costly. I've been an inspector for 26 years, and this has been the most extreme code change that I've seen when it comes to trying to make existing buildings comply. Even the building code, when it comes to existing buildings, it's always been do the best you can. Don't make it worse, but do the best you can. And I just think maybe that part of the code needs to be looked at. I'm all for new buildings. You know, they have to do what they have to do. But when it comes to existing buildings, I think there needs to be a little bit more grace involved and not expect a house that's very old to have to comply with today's standards. And particularly on the additions too, because if you're doing an addition and you're not doing anything on the existing house, even though it might be open to the existing house, I think it's a lot to expect that existing house to meet the HERS requirements. Hope that makes sense.
Yep. Thank you, James.
Okay.
Was that okay? We will now move on to the next block of 5 presenters. Leading us off, we have Derek McCowan, then Chris Lee, then Fred Leonardo, then Benjamin Bowers, then Alonso Dominguez. So the first from that list is Derek McCowan.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, you sound good.
Great, thank you. So I'm Derek McCowan. I'm with Simpson, Gumpertz, and Hager. I'm speaking, partly on behalf of SGH and partly on behalf of myself. And like a couple of the prior speakers, I'm going to share some comments on the thermal envelope and in particular, problems or challenges with existing buildings and restoring existing buildings. I'll say we're running into significant challenges when trying to design, responsible restoration projects at existing buildings, particularly old buildings with mass masonry exterior walls. So with a restoration project, sort of by nature, we're trying to salvage the old masonry walls. And as such, the insulation can really only be applied from the interior, at least at these sorts of projects. And, just the natural building structural elements, floor slabs and roof decks and whatnot will interrupt this interior insulation layer. And, we've done some analysis, the derating that's required. There's a very substantial impact on the overall U value metric. And at many of these projects, we just can't hit the target value. It's just not really possible, even, running, test runs with, 12 plus inches of closed cell spray foam along the back of the walls or more. We just can't hit the target values. It, just seems kind of overly harsh and, may encourage, project teams to just abandon certain, well-intentioned projects, projects that could dramatically improve the performance of old buildings that are currently performing poorly and, really improve energy performance, thermal performance, air infiltration resistance, and whatnot. I think there's real risk of projects not happening or perhaps projects being pushed into, widespread demolition of the old masonry walls or the building structures entirely, which just sort of doesn't, seems misaligned with common sense sustainability and carbon cutting goals. So, some suggestions for adjustments that could be considered. I'll just rattle off a few, maybe not requiring the derating for building additions or for building alterations, for restoration projects. Maybe rather than derating, consider, boosting the prescriptive values required at existing buildings. If derating will be required, consider a more significant increase in the overall, U value metric. I think 10% is allowed now, but looking at maybe 50 or 75%, 100% might be more realistic target, or maybe providing other compliance options that involve other things like more stringent air tightness requirements, alternative energy, all electric heating, cooling systems, things like that, other options. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. And again, please consider written comments. Next up, we have on my list Chris Lee, but I'm not seeing a Chris Lee in the attendees list. If you're there, Chris, if you want to raise your hand. Otherwise, I think we move on to Fred Leonardo. So I'm not seeing Chris, so Fred, I think over to you.
Not sure how I sign on to this. Raise your hand.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me, Ian?
Yep.
Because I'm on the CTEC, I don't know if it would be appropriate for me to speak on this. So I'd like guidance first.
Yeah, no, anybody is welcome to give comments,
All right, so,
even you.
oh, well, thank you for that. So that's why I did log on. So my concern for this is on the enforcement end of this. I voiced my opinion on this, I think before, but I want to be clear on it. I think there's still a disconnect between the Department of Energy and Resources and the Building Board of Regulations and Standards. There's certainly not enough coming out of the BBRS giving guidance on what we're supposed to be doing with the energy compliance. There's nothing been raised by the BBRS through any of the local organizations. There's been a gross lack of support and coordination between the two organizations, if you will. I'm still a little bit perplexed why we're having variances from the energy code channeled through the BBRS if in fact they're not responsible, nor can they comment on the energy code. So that seems to be a complete disconnect. I'm not sure why that process is going the way it is. I will say on the enforcement end, there's probably 350 different enforcements of the energy code currently. And I'm hearing that continually through the enforcement end of this, meaning by building commissioners and building inspectors. And until we get that clarified, I think this is going to be a tough code to enforce. I absolutely believe there needs to be more input from the inspectional end, and there needs to be more support from the BBRS, whatever that may take. Until we fix those problems, I think it's been difficult at best to enforce the code completely. And that's the basic gist, if you will. I will continue to do what I can on our end to support training. I'm in communication with Kelly Brown now to try to set up some training locally. I think we need more of that. But I'll get off my soapbox on that and I'll end my comments there.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Next up, we have Benjamin Bowers. Ben, are you able to unmute? Ben, we see you, but you're still muted. Oh, there we go. You're unmuted on our end, but we don't hear you. Maybe we'll give Ben a minute or two and try Alonso. Alonso Rodriguez. Sorry, Alonso Dominguez. My apologies.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Alonso Dominguez. I'm a principal with Early Studio. Actually, I'd like to yield my time to a colleague of mine who is also registered to provide a comment a little bit later.
Okay, thank you, Alonso. Okay, Benjamin Bowers, did you want to try again? Okay, we're not hearing anything, so I'm going to go to the next 5 speakers and see if we can circle back. So next we have Joe Prondak, then Glenn Travis, then Robert Hollies, then Fred Bunger, and Peter Dunbeck. So first in that list is Joe Prondak.
Do you have me?
Yep.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to provide comments. My name is Joe Prondak, and I am currently the building commissioner for the town of Needham, although my comments are my own. My career as a building inspector has spanned 37 years. And over those years, I've paid close attention to the need to improve energy efficiency in buildings. I firmly believe in the dire need to reduce carbon emissions and the use of fossil fuels. I will be submitting several comments in writing, but today I'm speaking to call attention to an extreme deficiency in our efforts to achieve our climate goals through the energy code, and specifically the need for training and licensing requirements for tradespersons that install mechanical equipment, as well as the need for qualified mechanical inspectors in every city and town. Currently, there is no apprenticeship or licensing requirement for persons who install mechanical systems. The code relies on the licensed construction supervisor as the primary party that ensures proper installation and operation of these mechanical systems that have become more and more complex in recent years. These licensees typically have little to no training or experience in mechanical installations. Similarly, the majority of building inspectors have little or no training or experience in this critical field. A couple of one-hour training sessions on how to read manual J, S, and D is grossly insufficient. And given the importance of proper sizing, installation, and operation of these critical systems to the efficient use of energy, there must be an apprenticeship licensing and training program for these tradespersons, much like that for licensed plumbers and electricians. There must also be dedicated mechanical inspectors in every city and town. Without this, we will fall short of actually achieving a true reduction in carbon emissions. We may achieve a perception of success on paper, but the reality will be drastically different. That's the summary of my comments, and I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Joe. Next is Glenn Travis.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so this is Evan Travis. I'm representing Glenn. I'm Glenn's son. We're with GMT Home Designs, a residential architecture firm in the Metro West area. And I just wanted to say thank you for your time and allowing us to give our comments. I think it's been refreshing kind of hearing other people's thoughts and opinions on what's been going on. As the tip of the spear as an architecture firm, we've found it difficult in the many different towns that we work in. We work all throughout Massachusetts, and the interpretation of the code by the building inspectors. We've had to add an additional kind of step in our process in making sure that we're talking to the different building inspectors in the different towns, as everyone's interpreting the code differently and how it's implemented, especially with existing buildings. And one area that we've found it challenging, especially is when there's a combination of an addition with a remodel. We understand over 1,000 square feet on addition, need to bring the rest of the house up to code, or a 50% change in the existing footprint of the home with a remodel. But when there's a combination of the two, it's not very clear on what is required if an addition is, say, 750 square feet and we're adjusting 48% of the existing home. It seems to be like there's a gray area in terms of what the code is wanting us to do. And so I think where our frustration lies is there hasn't been a lot of direction from the state to the building inspectors when it comes to training or when it comes to what really needs to happen in these old stock homes in Metro West and in our area in Boston. And so we're just hoping that we can be on more of a united front and kind of all have a similar understanding, because this is just not something that's happened in the past. And so we're finding it challenging. I mean, we're making it work, but we're hoping that that's something that can be implemented soon.
Thank you, Evan. And again, as a reminder for everybody, if you have questions about code, you can use the stretch code email. You can also use the Mass Save resource as well. Next up on the list is Robert Hollies. I'm not seeing that name on the list of attendees. So while we figure that out, maybe we can go to Fred Bunger, who I'm also not seeing on the list. So next up after Fred would be Peter Dunbeck. Peter, you should be able to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I am Pete Dunbeck. I'm the chair of Sustainable Westboro, but the opinions are mine and not the organization. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments, and I really appreciate hearing the range of challenges from architects and building inspectors and so forth. My comments are aligned a little different than the things I've been hearing. When the net zero energy code was being debated in the public comment period for the interim CECP in 2030, the plan for the state's energy code included the following statement, that what it was being called at the time, high performance stretch energy code or net zero energy code would be effective statewide, the statewide energy code no later than 2028. And this declaration was made before Governor Baker declared the net zero by 2050 goal and before it became state law in the regulations that were the law that was passed in March of 2021. In fact, during the Q&A period for that law signing, Governor Baker said, I think the biggest issue with the stretch code is not so much about having the right code, it's about having 351 codes. And he goes on to describe how critical it is to be predictable for everyone, and that the predictability will allow us to achieve affordability. And he states that the newly established law gives the administration the authority to deal with these issues, which I interpreted to mean DOER has the authority to establish the effective dates and transitions. But in spite of these stricter emission goals and the new authority, DOER backpedaled in the announced plan for the net zero energy code and eliminated the single code requirement for Massachusetts by 2028. I think this is a mistake. I think a benefit of a single energy code is that contractors and developers will more quickly be able to gain experience in both the interpretation of the code as well as the implementation of preferred technologies. And towns will not be pitted in competition for economic development with an incentive to select an energy code that creates higher emissions, but which impedes the state in achieving its net zero goals. The state is undercutting their own claims that the new energy code is more cost effective by allowing municipalities to stay on the base energy code, even though it has a higher life cycle cost to the detriment of all. I think DOER and BBRS should have a much simpler task in establishing the guidelines that we've been discussing today. And until there's a single energy code, these problems will continue. I'd also appreciate any feedback on whether you believe that, in fact, DOER and BBRS does have the authority to regulatory authority without new laws being passed by the legislature. Appreciate the opportunity to provide this input.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Okay, we're going to go to our next group of 5 speakers. And so that group is Matthew Friedlander, Kimberly Lazar, Aidan Maynard, John Rodenheiser, and Chris Mazzola. So first in that group is Matthew Friedlander.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Matthew Friedlander. I work for RenewAir, and we've manufactured residential and commercial energy recovery ventilators for over 35 years. We've always been active in development of certification programs and energy efficiency standards. And the Massachusetts Commercial Stretch Code is by far the most ambitious in the country in its treatment of energy recovery ventilation. We support its market transformation goals, but it locks out of the market most energy recovery ventilators using plate exchangers, which many engineers and building owners prefer over other technologies. We ask for adoption of specific changes and will outline them today and forward them as text. These will improve the stretch code while keeping it the most stringent in the nation. With all energy recovery technologies, every additional point of effectiveness comes at an exponentially increasing size and cost. So the change from a minimum enthalpy recovery ratio of 50% to the current 70% was a giant leap, requiring much larger or costlier equipment. In the winter, it is sensible energy recovery that saves energy. The function of latent energy recovery is frost point depression, so that preheating is not needed in cold weather, and to help maintain a comfortable indoor relative humidity without energy-consuming mechanical humidification. To accomplish this in winter, the enthalpy recovery ratio need only be 60%, but a 75% sensible energy recovery ratio should be added to the code. This would increase energy savings in winter. The summer enthalpy recovery ratio should change from 70% to 60%. A 60% enthalpy recovery ratio, an improvement over the 50% in the June 2022 draft, the same as in LEED and higher than any other standard, is still stringent, allowing only the top 10 to 20% of plate exchanger units to meet requirements. On an annual basis, these changes won't reduce energy savings, the primary goal of the stretch code, and will increase the equipment, technology, and design options available for engineers, contractors, and building owners. The stretch code would be a performance model for the industry, allow a robust and competitive marketplace, and lead the nation. There are three more opportunities for improvement. First, almost all manufacturers active in North America are in the HVI or AHRI third-party certification programs. Many codes refer to or require those certifications. Stretch codes should do the same. Secondly, the code does not currently set a limit for transfer of exhaust air to supply air. Both HVI and AHRI provide certified ratings for exhaust air transfer ratio. We recommend a reasonable limit be set either in code language or in the technical guidance document. Thirdly, HVI certified ERVs, while typically used in residences, should be added to the commercial code to allow their use in multifamily buildings. Thank you again.
Thank you, Matthew. So we're about 1 hour in now, and we are also about halfway through the folks that signed up in advance. So for anybody who's wondering how long it would take until they can add their name, that would be my best guess, would be somewhere around an hour from now. Hopefully that will allow us, if we stay on track, to get everybody's comments in this afternoon. So next up we have Kimberly Lazar. Kim or Kimberly, you're up.
Hi. So my name is Kim Lazar from WJE, and I'll keep this short because a lot of people have already kind of touched on the same points that I was going to make as well. We're also going to submit formal comments. So we've been having some, say, complications with the commercial energy code, primarily working with the existing building language. And so we were just hoping in general to see kind of more clarifications, as well as some slight leniencies towards what to do and how to achieve targets for, as Derek was saying, mass masonry structures that you're only interior insulating. We also would like to see all the language kind of consolidated in one location rather than being spread between the code itself and the guidance documents. A lot right now, there's some exceptions which are very helpful and useful exceptions, but they're kind of hidden away in the guidance documents. And so it gets kind of difficult to go back and forth between the two and kind of what overrules the other, especially when there's discrepancies between the two documents. So that's kind of the quick summary of what we want to talk about, and then the rest will be submitted in written form. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Next is Aidan Maynard.
Hi, folks. Thanks. I'm going to talk pretty quickly here because I have a few paragraphs. My name's Aidan Maynard at Powerhouse Energy Consulting. We're HERS rating and energy consultancy in Western Mass. As a rater, I'll speak mostly to the R code, the residential components of stretch. First, I just want to say the last couple of years have been a great step to the big changes in July that are coming that I'm sure we all are somewhat familiar with. It should be clear by now that heat pumps are always the most cost-effective choice for space conditioning and new construction. And a lot of efforts over the last couple of years got to that place through the code, robust incentives, and also quickly adjusting HVAC professionals. So a little bit of I want to commend you all on that. I think we're more ready for it than we thought we would be. As has been mentioned, the 52 HERS requirement for renos and additions, is definitely the most controversial part of the current stretch code, and I do think it does need clearer trigger points and thresholds, including for projects that are undergoing fire restoration. And then this concept of, is it renovation and addition or addition, both, one or the other? And that's a bunch of confusion there. And also, as I heard on this call, there's confusion that a HERS rating can be done on part of a house, which it cannot. So we're always talking about the whole house. We have a bunch of experience in those projects, but there's not enough time to speak more on it right now. Another comment is I'd encourage ventilation requirements to require commissioning and minimum flow rates, much like ZRH and FIAS does, not just a whole house ASHRAE flow. That approach does not support healthy homes nor ensures consumers are getting the benefit of a system that they purchased. We need better designed and commissioned ventilation systems, ERVs and HRVs. Regarding the specialized code, it's pretty clear that the multifamily passive house requirements are going to require a lot of professional support and hand-on training, not just a few dollars here and there for FIAS certifications and verifications, but designers to builders to HERS raters are going to need a lot of support to make that reality as the specialized code broadens. More generally, more consistent code enforcement and support of inspectors is needed for consistency. I expect this to require a carrot stick approach, as there are some commissioners that are causing confusion because to be frank, they're not wanting to read the full code and ask questions for things they don't understand. And I think they need to be expected to do such. Something that might help is a checklist at time of permit. I think that would be hugely productive, kind of taking some of the onus off of those overwhelmed building officials and setting projects up for success up from the beginning. Kind of related, with 10 seconds left is I encourage DOER to be involved with cleaning up the Mass Save incentive program, making things easier to get, particularly as more prescriptive electrification rebates are coming on board for equipment, and also bundling in tax incentives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aidan. Next is John Rodenheiser, who I don't see on the current list. So we'll circle back on John. I'll put up your hand if you're there. After John is Chris Mazzola. Okay, Chris, you should now be able to
Yes.
speak.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Great. My name is Christopher Mazzola. I am the production manager at Home Energy Raters. We're residential rating company based out of Sagamore Beach, Massachusetts. I'm also the former president of the Northeast Home Energy Rater System Alliance. I have 2 quick comments, and I'll try to stay within my 3 minutes. My first comment highlights the emerging issue known as the silver tsunami and the need to increase tradespeople in the green residential homes construction industry, education and verification training for municipal building officials and home energy raters, to verify the International Conservation Code. To address this issue, it is crucial to invest in the trades industry education and training programs that can be equipped to help younger generations with the necessary skills and the knowledge to fill the impending void. By providing comprehensive and accessible education and training opportunities, we can assure a smooth transition and maintain a high standards of quality and safety in the trades industry. My second comment is that we need to discuss the potential for more collaboration between various groups and organizations in Massachusetts that are all working towards the common goal of decarbonization. As we strive to achieve a sustainable and carbon neutral future, it is essential to collaborate and leverage each other's expertise and resources effectively. There are many groups in Massachusetts that I'm personally involved with, and that's AnyHers, Chris Magwood and Andy Bacino's Embodied Carbon Working Group through AnyHers. Chris Magwood was with Rocky Mountain Institute. Andy Bacino's with Stephen the Company. Jacob Racusin with Build Naturals, heavily involved. The Builders for Climate Action, Mass CEC, the Massachusetts Utility Companies, and Mass Save. These are all organizations working toward the same goal, but we know that there are additional organizations out there in the state working toward the same goal, following the same parallel path. We need to bring all those organizations together, work together, and accelerate the transition to a low carbon economy. And I will release the remaining of my time back to the group. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, moving on to the next group of 5, starting with Tobias Glidden, then Joseph Topham, or Joe Topham, Peter Delaney, then Kevin Bergeron, and then Stephen Drury. So I don't see a Tobias Glidden. So maybe we could start with Joseph Topham.
How are you all?
Good, thank you.
So some of the problems that we're having on Nantucket is we have a historical district commission, and part of that historical district commission controls everything from paying culture to everything. So one of the things is they will not allow triple pane windows in the OHD in the old historic district. So they were going to basically shut that down. Then the other part of it is we have so many historic structures on Nantucket that are over 50 years old, and we're designated as a historic district because we can't, everything you want to do and change in Nantucket, it needs approval. So one of the things they're not going to allow us to do is, put solar panels inside the old historic district. Everything is viewed. There are parts of the house that are outside of the old historic district, and they're not allowing solar panels because you can't, because you can see them from the street. Another part is National Grid is saying if you change everything to electric, that they're not going to be able to provide power because we're on a cable. And so they would have to put in a third, if not a fourth cable. And National Grid is not in any means, shape, or form ready to start that project. So we're having a lot of problems. The other part that I'm hearing is that we would not be able to do duct work, and that would create a lot of problems where we would have mini splits on the outside of buildings. Well, that falls back into the HCC, and they're not going to permit them in certain areas because they're highly visible. So that caused another problem. The other thing is modular home companies are saying that the weight of the windows and insulation and et cetera they would have to do on these projects, that they couldn't get the buildings down the road, so they can't get to Nantucket or get to the Cape and then get on the barge and then come off Nantucket and be rolling down the streets because they were having the weight issue. And then some of the insulation values they're having a hard time meeting. Even though in Nantucket we're building at, you know, anywhere from, I would say 47 up to 50 on an everyday easy layup project, but we're still having some problems getting to some of these ratings that that we're looking to achieve. The other part of it is affordable housing. We're trying to get affordable housing in Nantucket, and by putting in this code, by doing the stretch code, it's going to push that cost. We're estimating anywhere from a minimum of $150,000 up to $250,000 just to get a home that everyone is, you know, beg, borrow, and stealing to get a lot in Nantucket. Well, now you've just moved that goal line out another 5 years for someone, or 10 years to raise that money. So it's just not cost effective. So we're really trying to work with that. And I know that, you know, we do want to do more, and we are trying to do more, but we're just having a problem reaching this. And so right now, the other part of it is, you know, can we do a hybrid house versus electric, and maintaining, you know, outside units and being reliable sources, and building envelopes are properly insulated and not being fully understood. And so there's, you know, even the energy code professional in Nantucket, for the town of Nantucket, she's struggling with some of these details that are coming. And I just, the other part is, if you do a house over 1,000 square feet and you have to renovate the rest of the house, well, we have a lot of history in Nantucket, and that gets wiped away. And then last time I asked someone about that, they said, oh, well, you can just apply for a variance. Well, that's going to be a variance for about 1,000, if not 2,000 homes. And we're just kind of worried, like, how do we get that approved? And one gentleman said, oh, it takes about a week. Well, if we're coming in with 2,000 homes for Nantucket, it's just not going to work. So there's a lot of disconnects, and it may work in the, you know, Massachusetts, and that's great, but I don't feel like there's any practical knowledge or experience being really put forward for this, and it really doesn't work on Nantucket. So I would love for you guys to say, let's take a break. I get the energy and the insulation's working, but I think the mechanical systems are not advanced enough to kind of keep up with this advance that you're wanting to do. And I just think it's being pushed along, you know, too fast, is my opinion. But I want to thank you for the extra time.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Next is Peter Delaney, but I'm not seeing Peter in the attendees list. So I think we'll move on to Kevin Bergeron. Kevin, if you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you guys for taking the time. My name is Kevin Bergeron. I work for RST Thermal. We are a independent manufacturer's rep firm headquartered in Fall River, Massachusetts. We're hoping today that the comments we make, along with the written comments that we have to follow, will help reform the energy recovery ventilation part of the stretch code. As it's written today, the code has effectively eliminated the use of a widely accepted and used energy recovery technology, also known as an ERV. In addition to this, it has allowed other uncertified technologies to comply, which is inequitable. We represent multiple types of ERVs, and they've all been effectively made unusable in the Massachusetts market. After researching the code, we discovered that it is by far the most stringent code in the country, and as a Massachusetts resident myself, it's gone a bit too far. The DOER communicated to us that the code's purpose was to drastically reduce heating loads while also not increasing cooling loads. However, the increase in the cooling efficiency metrics has gone too far. Matthew Friedlander, who's one of our associates at RenewAir, has outlined our proposed changes to the code, and they fall in line with the code's goal to keep it as the most stringent code in the country, and we support that proposal. Aside from the efficiency numbers, this code has also restricted the products available to designers in the Massachusetts market. Some applications are better suited towards static plate energy recovery systems because of their ease of maintenance. Other technologies need more maintenance, which increases the chance of a building not having energy recovery active. And engineers actually plan for this. The code says nothing about ERV technologies that require preheat or defrost. While this is a tough metric to measure, we believe it needs to be taken into consideration. When an ERV goes into defrost or preheat, it uses energy that would not need to be used by technologies that do not need a defrost cycle or a preheater. This takes away from the overall efficiency of an ERV. The code is only looking at thermal efficiency of the heat exchanger, but that is only part of the story. We're concerned about the cooling portion of this code primarily. Based on the goal of reducing heating loads, we're not sure why there's such a high metric for the cooling side. Passive house is a compliance path to this code, and that has no requirements for cooling efficiencies. If our goal is to reduce heating loads drastically, I think there should be more focus on that side of the code, and that comes down to sensible effectiveness more than anything in the wintertime. Lastly, we find it pretty inexcusable that there is no requirement for third-party testing done by AHRI. We've been approached by multiple engineers with a solution that they think they can use, only to find out that the units they're looking at are not AHRI certified. Every manufacturer who is trying to meet a specific efficiency metric should be on a level playing field. Thank you for the time today. Much appreciated.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Next is Stephen Drury, but I'm not seeing Stephen Drury in the attendees list. So we're going to keep rolling on with the next 5 speakers. So starting with William Potter, then Benjamin Lebowitz, then Alejandra Menchaca, then Jim Haggerty, and then Greta Eckhart. So first in that list was William Potter. But I'm not seeing any Potters in the list. So we can try Benjamin Leibowitz. I see a Richard Leibowitz. Is that the same person? I'm not seeing a hand raise. So do we have Alejandra Menchaca? Alejandra, you can speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for organizing this listening session. I'm Alejandra Menchaca, founding principal with Airlit Studio. We are helping many design teams that are struggling to meet stretch code on many areas, either renovations or new construction, be it TEDI modeling or backstop and envelope performance calculations. A couple of comments for you today. One comment that hasn't been brought up, and this is specific to renovations, there is, if there is a change of occupancy or use in renovations, right now the code stipulates that if there is a change of occupancy, but also the change of occupancy results in an increase in demand for either fossil fuel or electrical energy, then the requirements are more stringent than if there were not this increase in energy. The key challenge with this language is that it says either fossil fuel or electrical energy. So a building that is aiming to be all electric and would naturally increase its electric use because it would be decreasing its fossil fuel use would be treated under more stringent requirements than if it didn't. And we are seeing at least one project deciding to stay with fossil fuel because they don't want to have to go through these requirements. And so it's challenging just passing it on and asking you to see if there is any possibility that DOER could amend this language so that we are not seeing some backwards reactions in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of decarbonizing buildings. My other comment has to do in general with TEDI modeling. The TEDI modeling guidelines as well as modeling process itself is frustrating many. The guidelines were helpful, but have many gray areas, and it's leading to a lot of confusion. This is leading to many people reaching out to you which means that DOER is kind of becoming the bottleneck for projects to get clarification. And so a suggestion that we would have is there any way that there could be a public resource or a public forum where comments are made public, clarifications are made public, so that we don't all need to wait for one of you to respond, and then we kind of get different versions on answers, and so then we need to email again to get clarification on the different versions or different interpretations of what we get on a call. That would be extremely useful and would save our teams and us a lot of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alejandra. Next, we have Jim Haggerty.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Again, my name is Jim Haggerty. I'm a designer and builder here on Cape Cod, and we have been seeing a lot of issues with some of the projects. Certainly, we got a couple towns in here that jumped into the opt-in code, which is a little bit more stringent than what's coming in July. So we're kind of sticking our toe into the waters here with the current what's going to happen in July. So what we're seeing is costs. I think this has been radically underestimated, the cost of these new regulations. From what we're pricing out, we've seen the cost of homes go up about 10% just to meet these requirements, between insulation upgrades, between what we need to use for new windows, lots of different items that go on with trying to make this work, mechanical systems and so forth. The size of the power we have to bring into the houses. From some of them, in some cases, we're bringing 400 amp services into the houses. To meet the 42 and 45 HERS scores, it's just going to get more difficult. What we're seeing with the new code, with having the R30, we need to accomplish in the walls with a 2x6 wall that's fully filled with closed cell foam, and that's about $6 a square foot for that, and which is equivalent to buying oak flooring, putting in all your walls and sheetrocking over it. Just for perspective, we're now using closed cell foam in the entire roof assembly, as well as upgrading, of course, all the windows with specialty glazings and such. We just priced a home, not too big. It was under 3,000 square feet with this insulation package, and it was $120,000 just for the insulation package. Same house, probably 6-7 years ago, with fiberglass, it was probably about $30,000. So it's pretty substantial. The cost of lumber in a home is about 10%, 10 to 15% of the total package of the cost. And this alone, just the insulation, we feel is going to jump about 10% the whole project. So it's quite substantial. Also, in terms of solar, will help us get the scores that we need. But we've been having some concerns and trouble with connecting some of the solar to the grid. We've had issues with Eversource saying that we can't do it in certain areas. We have to upgrade these transformers, and who knows when that's going to happen. And we have I have a 6 kW system on my office building now. We're trying to, for the last year and a half, get a 22 kW system so we can go net zero in our office building. We just can't do it. And if I have to meet the HERS score of 42, and the solar panels help me get there, then I need to have that HERS score finalized with those online in order to get my occupancy permit. So this is going to, if I can't connect, you can't get a CO, people are going to move into a house. It's going to be a big problem. So I appreciate you taking these comments from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Next up is Greta Eckhart.
Hi, this is Greta Eckhart. I'm a retired architect and continue to be active in the Building Enclosure Council and organizing the Wagdian East Symposium. So I'm primarily here to listen and understand what kind of educational things those groups can help offer. But and now I'm not really speaking for either organization, but just for myself. My main comment is about electrification and the emphasis on getting rid of all fossil fuel burning furnaces and so forth. I have two siblings who live in Maine, and there was power outage for two days, and I just sort of am aware of what happens when a grid is down, and then you have no heat. They can't even charge their car, and so what kind of redundancies will there be that will allow these ambitious electrification goals to be met? And I also have just wondered if anybody has really assessed how much land needs to be used to house the solar panels that would generate the amount of electricity that's being talked about. And, you know, is there a big picture? I haven't been able to find like a study that really puts the big picture together and says, yes, we can go all electric by a certain year. So that's my main comment. And I'm heartened. I also was concerned about how enforceable are these new codes, but people have spoken eloquently on that already.
Okay, thank you, Greta. Okay, so on to our next group of 5, starting with Will Curran, then Tamara Small, then Douglas Scott, then Kristen Whalen, and finally Matthew Cummings. So I'm not seeing a Will Curran. So Tamara Small, if you're here.
Good afternoon. I'm Tamara Small, CEO of NAP Massachusetts, the Commercial Real Estate Development Association. For the record, NAP represents the interests of companies involved with the development, ownership, management, and financing of commercial properties. We have about 1,800 members who are involved with office, lab, industrial, mixed use, multifamily, retail, and institutional space in Massachusetts. Until 2009, as you both know, Massachusetts had just one statewide energy code. Now Massachusetts has the base code, the stretch code, the specialized municipal opt-in code, and 10 communities who are each adopting their own slightly different version of the fossil fuel ban. The level of confusion around what code is in effect, where and when, and what the requirements are to comply with each version is truly unlike anything the industry has ever experienced. And it is impacting new development as well as renovations of all product types, as we've heard today. NAIOP members represent large and complex projects, typically employing teams with global expertise on design, construction, and energy efficiency. Unfortunately, even with robust resources and highly sophisticated consultants, and communities have adopted the municipal opt-in code, construction on already approved and entitled projects is unable to move forward due to the cost implications of these codes. They're halting the production of desperately needed new housing and preventing critical economic development projects from moving forward. This is because, as we've heard today, working with the state's largest construction companies and partners in the building trades, developers have determined that the municipal opt-in code adds approximately $50 of hard cost per square foot to a building. When the hard cost premium is compounded by the current interest rate environment, it results in a total project cost increase of anywhere from 10 to 13% overall. This premium makes the project itself worth less than the entire cost to build, resulting in no financing. These costs are so significant, there's now real concern that the existence of the municipal opt-in code, as well as the fossil fuel bans, give municipalities an avenue to stop development altogether without having to explicitly come out against new housing. The developers NAIOP represents are supportive of green and climate-ready housing, but the additional cost being associated with the implementation of these codes is making investors look elsewhere. Without action, these codes will continue to threaten Massachusetts' competitiveness and future economic security. In addition, NAIOP has heard consistent feedback from members that even in situations where projects can achieve overall building performance targets, the methodologies outlined in the code are often not possible or come at such a time and financial premium that it dissuades investors without appreciable improvements to the overall building and little to no change in achieving the decarbonization target. NAIOP's also heard from both municipal officials and project proponents that DOER's management of code review by just a few people within the apartment causes significant delays, which we've heard also about today, and real backlogs, along with inconsistent review determinations and little oversight. Finally, for the building code, project proponents have an opportunity to seek relief from its provisions in the form of a variance or interpretation of the applicability of a particular code section. Appeals board members are not allowed to waive code requirements in their entirety, but may consider alternative methods of complying with the intent of the code. However, there is no such relief pathway for these energy codes. NAP strongly recommends the creation of a relief pathway modeled on the existing BBRS frameworks to allow project proponents the ability to present hardship and navigate solutions that advance climate goals without harming projects. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you, Tamara. Next, we have Douglas Scott.
Hello?
Good
Can you hear
afternoon.
me? Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, that's
Oh,
better.
great, thank you. Sorry about that. I am a building commissioner and I do some consulting work on the side where we're actually wrapping up a brand new all-electric house. It's about 2,000 square feet. But I wanted to say that in 47 years, I was involved in the Energy Crafted Home program back in the 90s. That this is probably, and I preface all my comments by saying that I'm all for energy efficiency, an efficient home, a warm home, a cool home, and safety for all. But it seems to me the training is poor. The companies that you've hired regurgitate the same thing over and over again. It's confusing. They are confused, which makes the building officials confused. There is no mandated training for any of the contractors, which definitely needs to happen. When I built during the building of the house that I'm building, that's all electric with a friend, we had to do a training exercise for the installation contractors so that they fully understood how neatness and how the insulation needs to be installed. The other big thing that I'm getting is that 1,000 square feet where you have to take the whole, and I'm going to piggyback on what others have said, where if you build a 1,000 square foot addition, like a home, an in-law apartment. Now the state's pushing for in-law apartments now. They want to make it required to be allowable in every community in the state. Well, if you get 1,000 square foot addition, you're building for your mother-in-law or father-in-law or parent. Now you've got to bring your whole house up to code, which is highly unreasonable. It's a huge expense. The building officials keep getting a bad rap because we're the ones that are expected to know and understand all of this, when you can hear that the engineers and designers are having a difficult time doing it. And the last thing I wanted to say is you need to start thinking about more of the exterior envelope for single family homes. You need to start treating them like commercial buildings where they're wrapped with the Henry blueskin. You know, Tyvek is in products like Tyvek have 1,000 holes that are put into it. Anything like that is just not doing any good. You're requiring everything to be done on the interior, but you're not stopping it from anything good happening to seal out the exterior. And I want to thank you all for listening to me, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Douglas. And thank you to everyone who's giving comments. It is very helpful to us to hear them. And we seem to be getting closer to the end of our pre-registered speakers. So I see about 6 more. So next up is Kristen Whalen, who I'm not seeing on the attendee list. And then Matthew Cummings. So Matthew, I think you are next up.
Hello, my name is Matthew Cummings, and I'm from Cummings Architects and Interiors. I'd like to speak specifically to section 502.1.1 large additions to be pointed. We specialize in wonderful renovations and additions to smaller homes. Often the existing home is only 1,000 to 2,000 square feet. I'd like to just make some points of information first. HERS raters are not technically allowed to rate additions. This leaves them to have to HERS rate the addition and the home. So many homes are historic, some are small. Many historic homes are not listed, historically listed, but may have deed restrictions by nonprofit agencies, not allowing plaster, siding, or windows to be changed at all legally. Some towns, such as my hometown here of Ipswich, have 30% of the homes that are historically listed. Many are not listed. Although 1,000 square feet is allowed prior to the need for a HERS rater, when you add a conditioned basement, which people typically put HVAC systems within it, that reduces the addition to only 500 square feet. Many existing homes having slabs on grade cannot be updated at all to meet a HERS rating without tearing down the entire home. As an example, a builder named Campanelli built 20,000 homes in Massachusetts that people live in today. Since this code has come out, we have as architects, when people call for initial projects, we have to turn away 1/3 of the people telling them they cannot add to their homes. To add a simple family room, bedroom, or similar additions, or like a nice fella just spoke about, in-law additions. They then abandon their hopes to add additions to their homes for their growing families, and instead leave the home as is with bad insulation, HVAC systems. Many families who also want to add to the homes will not, because they recently invested in new windows, insulations, and so forth under previous codes. But because the additions might be 500 square feet or 1,000 square feet, whether they have a basement or not, that means they have to make the new house meet code, but they might have just fell under the code several years ago. Then they're not going to tear out their kitchens and bathrooms they just renovated. So what we found is that more and more people are just deciding not to renovate their little homes, capes, or ranches, not adding second floors on their capes, and instead just abandoning their homes and leaving and moving somewhere else. This leaves these small homes with oil and gas. And the new people who are going to buy those homes as first-time home buyers cannot afford to renovate their entire home with the additions. I think this is counterintuitive to wanting energy-efficient homes. So at least 1/3 of our clients we have to turn away, and they actually don't do the project at all. So thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, next up, and I think this is the last group of pre-registered speakers. I have Justin Humphreys, Chris Clemente, Gary Fondorf Dick, and Jay Smith. So first of those is Justin Humphreys. I don't see Justin Humphreys on the call. Now let's see, we've got Chris Clemente. I don't see a Chris Clemente either. I do see Gary Fondorf Dick. Gary, do you want to speak?
I do, yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. I want to thank you for hosting this listening session. I find it a great learning experience and share a lot of the concerns of the speakers who you have heard from today. I'm a registered architect, retired. I've done a lot of work in research in institutional facilities, but I'm focusing now on residential homes. I'm also on the Climate Action Commission in my town of Hingham, a town which has a significant number of historic homes. a significant senior citizen population who owns those homes. In a situation where we're trying to figure out practical compliance paths that can be used on a house that's 50 years old to a house that's 350 years old without compromising the essential architectural character of the home, but also being able to be done in a phased way where a homeowner can actually consider funding some of these. And so one of the things I wanted to just suggest is, could we focus on an existing buildings development of a more refined existing buildings energy code, one that identifies practical phased pathways? For example, dealing with the envelope of the building, could we look at U value and convective reduction strategies at areas of the structure that are exposed, attics or cellars or windows or doors, and perhaps focus on that first, while we're also focusing on non-fossil fuel heating systems, whether it be air-to-air heat pump systems or air-to-water heat pump systems, in such a way where we can start. We might not meet the total goal right now, which is rather ambitious, of these codes, but at least we can have a much larger percentage of existing homes try to comply in whatever level that the owners can afford or can understand. I also wanted to say that I see in a number of the applications, I think we need to really put some serious focus on developing technologies for compliance. Windows, for example, at MIT, we used a vacuum insulated glass in the renovations of the main group, the limestone buildings, that has an R value of 5, has a thickness of about 5/16. It's not the weight or the mass of a argon-filled aluminum frame system. Are there ways we can look at photovoltaic slate roof shingles that can be integrated into the fabric of these historic buildings? Most people don't want to put an appliance on the roof, like a big panel. So these are just some practical realities. And the other thing we're looking at in terms of developing some compliance paths locally is setting up some prototype homes, kind of like a This Old House program, where we can take a home that's 300 years old, post and beam, or we can take a home that's 150 years old, which is balloon framed, or we can take a 20th century home, which is more of a platform frame construction, and walk through the whole process from the beginnings of the mass save analysis to the existing conditions to evaluating technologies and approaches that we can use, all in the approach of education. Because I think that, even as an architect, I find that coming up to speed on all this is somewhat overwhelming. And I share the concerns of the builders and the building commissioners on the call, where I think we're going too fast. I think we need to spend some more time assimilating the stretch code before we even do the specialized code. I just think people are getting very confused. So with that, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and I appreciate your having this learning session.
Okay, thank you, Gary. And the last on our list of pre-signups is Jay Smith. Jay, if you're ready. Jay, I think you can unmute if you want to talk. Okay, I'm not seeing any response from Jay there. So at this point in proceedings, we've been through everyone that signed up ahead of time. And so now if you would like to make comments and didn't register ahead of time, we do have time available for that. I'm trying to see if I can figure out how to lower all hands. And then I'd encourage people to raise hands and leave them up if you'd like to speak. And we'll go through and try and take any additional comments that folks might have. So I see a couple of people still have their hands up, so I'm just going to take those down. And now, if anybody is on right now and would like to add comments, if you can use the hand raise function at the bottom of your screen, it says raise hand, then you're welcome to have 3 minutes of time to speak. I'm not seeing anyone. Oh, here we go. Okay, we're seeing a lot of people. Okay, so I'm going to just read off the list and hopefully you can all see the same list that I can. So it looks like Christine Boringa is first. Christine?
Hi, can you listen to me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for this. We submitted a question around this already, but I would like to state this just in case. I work with Perkins Eastman Architects on a firm-wide level, and we're highly interested in the passive house pathway related to the stretch code, but we have big concerns specifically related to the blower door results prior to issuing certificates of occupants. In this case, we do a lot of K-12 schools, and this represents a big risk in a sense that it's, well, you guys know it's very complicated to comply with this, and it's difficult to accomplish blower door testing in large buildings, which you know probably as well. And this requires multiple testing, and this is associated with certificates of occupancy. You can imagine already what this represents in terms of the risk in our schedules, and how at the end of the day it's very hard to recommend this pathway for our schools. And this, the most sad thing is that it's sort of endangering very cool projects that are getting stuck into this, and where owners see this as a main impediment to actually apply passive in this case. So, of course, I would like to emphasize that we're fully on support of the push that this represents for better and more efficiency, and that we acknowledge that infiltration is a huge part and very important part of this, but it would be good to acknowledge that a couple of cases for flexibility, specifically related to the certificate of occupancy timing, would be very important in this case, at least for this path. Because otherwise, we don't see how we are going to be able to accomplish with this without treading the project schedule, or even the owner coming on board with this. So allowing for some form of conditional certificate would be great, or for some combination for other requirements. Yeah, that's something. And I also would like to add to this that I totally agree with Alejandra Menchaca's comments, just as a side note, but that's another thing. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Next up is Charlie Silva.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
Thank you guys for having this session. It's good for us to all to get our opinions out there. I'm the owner of Silver Brothers Construction, and we also do the TV show This Old House, you know, which means we work on a lot of old homes. And these are only my views. The HERS Energy Code, I feel like it's a one-size-fits-all with no or little wiggle room. We want to build the best energy efficient home, but at what cost? And that really means to the homeowners. My This Whole House project last year was a mid-century modern home, and it was in Lexington, and it was the first project permitted with a HERS, and it was really a surprise to all of us what we had to achieve to get it, because a mid-century modern home, a lot of this house is slab on grade, brick exterior, carrying it into the interior, and a lot of glass. So we decided to do a scene because of the HERS rating. We like to show new products as well as new codes. And I really recommend, if you haven't seen it, to see it, because we actually built some good mock-ups of all the things that we had to do to achieve our 52. And to do this, we gave the list to our HERS rater of all of our new windows, everything that we were already going to do in the home, including geothermal, solar, and really a really efficient home. But plugging all this into the computer, we still didn't get to a 52. Not knowing really what else we could do, I suggested we take up the existing slab, excavate down, spray closed cell foam, re-pour, and as well as on the existing framing of the house, the 2x8 framing we were going to fill with closed cell foam, really giving us about a 50, still wasn't good enough. I installed 2 layers of 1-inch foam on the roof, sheathed it again, and put a new roof on it. And now all of this was supposed to be finally get our 52. And at the end of all this, we did our HERS rating, and it was great. We got a 39. And everybody thinks that's great, and I do too. But at what cost to the homeowner? I estimated this cost about 20 to 25% more because of the extensive work that we had to do. And, sorry, 1 second here. So I think we just have to be really careful on how much of this one-size-fits-all approach that we have to do. My solution is, I think we need to give the building inspectors a lot of flexibility on sometimes individual projects because of the one-size-fits-all approach. I also think we should have a sliding scale. So for example, if an existing home rates at 110, maybe you only have to get to an 85. A house that gets an 85, maybe that gets to a 52. And I think this is going to make more projects happen because you're better off with some improvements than none at all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Charlie. Next, we have Cindy Ahrens.
Thank you very much. My name is Cindy Ahrens. I'm the chair of the Sustainable Lexington Committee, and I'm also the co-founder of Clean Heat Lexington, but I'm speaking on my own behalf. I'd like to thank DOER for putting together the reference document and for updating the reference document. And I would urge DOER to, I know that you've said before that you'll take questions at stretchcode@mass.gov, but to encourage to all of the questions that come in to sort of consolidate them. And as I heard here today, there were a lot of existing home additions and alterations that had a lot of questions and maybe some FAQ or some, I think there's room to put more clarifying information into your reference document, which I find very useful. So I'm looking forward to an updated reference document after you've collected all of the input that you have. I just wanted to respond to that was my comment. I just wanted to respond to Ms. Small's comments earlier that stretch code requirements or even special ed code requirements are making building impossible. I'd like to say, being from Lexington, Lexington is a 10 community fossil fuel free participant, and it actually in the last year we had changed our zoning. We're complying with the MBTA communities state law, and that has opened up hundreds and hundreds of new units that are going to be now in the pipeline. Hundreds and hundreds, multiple properties, building multifamily, building new construction. So I would just like to say that this is with the stretch code and with the specialized code and being part of the 10 communities. And we are going to be seeing hundreds of units of new construction come in the coming years. So I don't think that what is in the code is for new construction. I'm talking about new construction only, is preventing any of that. And I just want to say one last thing. There was somebody else who had mentioned earlier about making it cost more for affordable housing. There are quite, I would be happy to help that caller access all sorts of rebates, benefits, incentives, statewide, federally, all sorts of things to lower the cost for affordable housing. And we've been doing lots of talking about the cost of construction, but we also need to be thinking about long-term cost of ownership, creating healthier and resilient homes for people that are living in them. And that should be part of the conversation when we're talking about any new requirements. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy. Next up is Kathleen or Kathy Nugent.
Hello. Hi, it's Kathleen Nugent. I've been a building official for 35 and a half years, and I'm the president of the Mass Federation of Building Officials, but I've been speaking on my own behalf. I have to thank many of the building officials that have already spoken in regards to the challenges that we're facing with enforcing the stretch code itself. A couple of the things that I haven't heard that I just wanted to bring to your attention. Part of what they were speaking about is the extra cost. My concern is that it's forcing people to risk doing work without permits, and therefore it's not being inspected. For example, say someone wants to finish their basement, it's over 1,000 square feet. They're afraid of all the extra costs that are going to be incurred, and they wouldn't be able to afford that. So then they risk finishing a basement without a permit. Basements may seem like it's a simple thing, but in terms of inspections, and there's a lot of draft stopping, fire stopping, making sure that you have adequate ventilation, not just talking about mechanical ventilation, but natural ventilation, emergency escape windows if they're creating bedrooms. Basements are especially very problematic when you're trying to finish that space, and to do it without a permit and not have it inspected. I just fear that the risk that we're putting homeowners at by trying to work around the energy code, doing work without permits, what that's actually perhaps what risk they may be at with that. Also, someone earlier mentioned that they found that the guidance document is very helpful, and it is helpful, but as building officials, we can only by law enforce the code, even though the guidance may, give other options. We cannot use that as a tool of enforcement. We only can enforce the code. And I apologize, I've already left my office and I left my notes at work. I'd be submitting a written statement as well, but thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And it's just a good reminder to everybody that please submit written comments by 5 o'clock Eastern next Wednesday. Next up, we have Rachel Keenan-Roberts.
Hi there, Rachel Keenan-Roberts. Can you hear me? Yep, good. Architect, solar practitioner, working in Western Mass, primarily in renovations and additions. And I'm sorry I came in 15 minutes late or so, and perhaps this has already been mentioned, but I was surprised that it hadn't come up while I've been listening. Just some frustration that I think overlaps with many people who've spoken about renovations and the particular difficulties surrounding adopting the code in that context. particularly around embodied versus operational carbon. I understand that the code is really focused on operational carbon, but in service to the state's goals of carbon neutrality or a low carbon future, it feels a bit like a backward step to be foaming the daylights out of these buildings, using a lot of high carbon products for which the payback is going to be decades from a carbon standpoint. Ultimately, really kind of working against our goal of decarbonization. I imagine a lot of people here are familiar with the Efficiency Vermont study that was done, comparing a code-built home, obviously not stretch code, but a code-built home, passive house, both with standard off-the-shelf foam products versus low-carbon products, and the payback in carbon on those different scenarios. The passive house, the highly insulated house, the house that went beyond the standard code, had a 20-year payback in carbon, which is not really a deficit that we can afford to be spending onto at this point. And especially in terms of a renovation, where there are often a lot of places where it's difficult to use, a cellulose or a low carbon type of product, and foam is the go-to, like the previous speaker, this old house person said. You just end up throwing foam at your problems. And I think that's really going to come back to bite us down the road if the ultimate goal is decarbonization, which I think it really should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Next is Russell Cole. Russell, did we lose you? Not seeing Russell anymore. Okay, let's go to Chris Lee. Chris, I think you had signed up earlier, but we missed you at the time.
Yeah,
So
apologize for that. My name is Chris Lee. I run Backyard ADUs, which builds small homes in Massachusetts, Maine, and New Hampshire. We applaud what's going on with Stretch Energy Code. We think it's actually not that hard to meet some of these goals with mini splits and some of the new technologies. The one thing that we would request that be looked at is the HERS algorithm and how it applies to smaller homes, specifically under 1,200 square feet. There has been updates to the HERS algorithms and how they're calculating those scores, but they are still having a negative impact on a small home, and we think it's somewhere around 1,200 square feet. For example, our homes, the heating and cooling load as calculated by HERS, the HERS modeling, is typically less than 30% of the total energy usage of the home. And when we're looking at that in terms of dollar costs of electricity, it's anywhere between $300 and $500 per year. It's very small, so there's not really a lot of room there to upgrade to triple pane windows, put more insulation and things. We've kind of done everything that you can do. Now, what we've found is that the HERS algorithm is not taking into account a lower occupancy household. So when you're building something smaller with 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms, that's 800 square feet, it's creating an adverse motivation to add square footage to distribute the impact of a water heater or a stove or a fridge across those square feet. And it's creating a situation where builders are inadvertently building bigger in order to qualify for the HERS scores. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention. We have seen this. We saw it when we started in 2019. We saw it get better when they updated the algorithm in 2021, I believe. But it's still there, and it's at risk of impacting more people as the Stretch Energy Code bar gets pushed a little bit further. So I think a proposal that we have is to look at energy code, kind of like septics, look at septic capacity as a per occupant load. So when you're building, we want to consider do we want to build a 3,000 square foot house to house one person? Because at the end of the day, that house is going to use significantly more square feet than if we built the right house for that person, as terms of how much space do they need. So that's all I have. Please take a look at how that HERS rating is accounting for size and potential occupants, because it does look like it's having a negative impact on sub 1,000 square foot homes when it doesn't need to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Russell Cole, I just want to give you another chance if you want to provide comments. Okay, not hearing from Russell. Let's go to Michael Rafferty.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I work for MVG, Mount Vernon Group Architects. We do mainly public schools for 70 years. My experience is both in Massachusetts and Washington State. I left to Washington State. I'm from here, but I went to Washington State in 2006 when they changed their energy code and passed a law to become net zero by 2030. They decided to do a 15% improvement per year all the way to 2030. And when I left in 2016, came back here, and now I'm doing schools here, I was surprised when this code came out. We have to do TEDI, and we passed. We were the first, the consultants told us we were the first architect to pass. They ran their TEDI model on some older designs and they all failed. But because of my experience out in Washington with that incremental improvement over 15 years, architects and contractors slowly started to understand how to do it right. And they also had a technical engineer on the energy board to help people. I called her all the time, and if she didn't have the answer, she contacted the board to find out what she should tell people. And then they did publish a revision comment if it affected it. But when TEDI occurred last July, my experience helped the firm figure out what to do because the consultants couldn't tell us what to do in order to pass. Air infiltration was one of the major issues. So as we incrementally improved and ran new TEDI models, we went all the way up to R52 roofs, 4 inches of rigid on the outside, behind masonry, 6-inch studs with spray foam, triple pane windows, and then the air infiltration number was still at passive house levels. And this is with a school with 18% window to wall ratio, which on Washington, we tried to shoot for 22, 25, but I figured we needed to go even more. So we lowered it down to 18 and we still barely passed after we decided to raise air infiltration up to 0.20. Because passive, when we first started doing it, they were telling us we had to be passive house, which was 0.08. It was ridiculous. We were looking at products to basically seal every little hole in the whole building, but we took that out. So we finally figured out a solution to pass, and we're doing that now on our schools. But it was a trial and error. And our consultants are telling us now that there's chaos with the other architects. Most of them haven't been able to pass. So I do recommend that the energy board put out a model of if you have a school building, do this and have these ratios and these R values, and you'll probably, and depending on your orientation of building, because that affected it too, you might pass. If you're doing a house, you're going to have to do this. And I've heard everybody today about all the addition issues. Yes, I've talked to residential architects out in Washington. This was a problem out there. And I'm not sure what advice to give them because most of them were like, You got to tear the building down, tear the house down, rebuild it. It's going to be very difficult, especially if the house is poorly orientated and the windows are in the wrong place. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Next is Nat Lowell.
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me now? Thank
Yes.
you. And I just want to say thanks to everyone that's spoken. This has been really good. So I'm going to speak from a simpler sort of angle to this. I've been in the gas business, repairs, restaurants, houses, just about every imaginable thing since 1987. And I've taken a look at things from a lot different than just fixing. I look at building envelope stuff, crawl spaces that are literally petri dishes of nastiest bugs you've ever seen in your life, open crawl spaces, roofs wide open, either frozen or hot. And all the way we've been taught over the years, houses have to breathe, but they really don't. We still haven't figured out what I call the envelope science of a house. And what I mean by that is every builder in the Northeast should have a 100% agreement of what that means. And it's still not there. There are things that Mass Save does over here on the Nantucket that are wrong. Now, some of the stuff they do is right, depends on where they do it. I see crawl spaces getting done with foam against the floor joists and the left open underneath. Are you kidding? That's ridiculous. That is the wrong way to do it. So what I want to say to you is using less fossil fuel should be the goal, not zero fossil fuel. Because all the existing homes that are out there that are burning a lot of gas or a lot of oil or both can be drastically improved to use a lot less. And they are a little at a time. With mini splits, which I encourage people to put in because of air conditioning and heating is cheaper, but they have real air conditioning instead of window units. But redundancy, servicing, outside things rust. Things don't work. Mini splits aren't going to last for 25 years, okay? Like boilers do. And you're going to find that there's going to be a lot of confusion in getting things repaired. I get service calls for electric calls, and they don't even know that they're electric. They think they're gas. The general public, the homeowner, is very confused with their new fancy thermostats, their hybrid systems that are great. That's what we should be shooting for, but those are still complicated. So the reliability, the service life, the backup, geothermal has to have a backup. We're not hearing the total truth. You have to be involved in this every day to understand all the nuances, like you've just heard earlier with the additions and all that stuff those people have all said are all true points. But in my humblest opinion, being a thrifty guy that likes to see people use a lot less energy, regardless of what kind they have, we should be really taking a step back and really educating everyone of what an actual conditioned space is, a natural conditioned space. We should be talking about in-floor heating, concrete slabs having insulation under them, all the different ways to build now where you can make your house essentially a Yeti cooler and use so little energy. And yet we're worried about banning gas when we should really be concerned with the right way to build. There's going to be better sheathing with insulation in the, on the outside of your house. There's going to be a lot of better ways to build as things continue. But I think we're going to a point of this net zero stuff is just unrealistic. We've been getting off fuel oil for 45 years and we're still on it, okay? Because it's reliable, because it works. You don't have to spend, $40,000 or $50,000 to change your system to something completely different. So there you go.
that-
That's all. That's it.
Thank
Sorry.
you. You just set the record.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that we're giving everybody a short window of time. So I
Yep.
hope
Thank you very much
consider,
for your time.
yeah, please consider written comments, and that holds for everybody. I just want to keep us moving here. So next we have Kevin Haggerty.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. First off, good afternoon. Thank you to the Commissioner Mahoney and the Department of Energy for hosting this listening session and providing another opportunity to comment. As said, my name is Kevin Haggerty, and I'm the president of Vicinity Energy. Vicinity Energy operates a 26-mile district energy network that supplies thermal energy to about 75 million square feet of space in Boston and Cambridge. The electrification of our district energy system and our decarbonization strategy involves implementing 3 distinct technologies. We're going to be implementing electric boilers, industrial scale heat pumps, and thermal storage. The installation of our 42 megawatt e-boiler is currently underway at our Kendall Station plant in Cambridge. It'll be operational this summer. For our 37 megawatt heat pump, we've entered in strategic agreements, and we're anticipating having that operational in 2028. Our 1,000 megawatt thermal storage, we're pacing offshore wind, and we're anticipating to have it operational by 2030. All 3 technologies are helping lead sustainable cities in Europe, and we're proud to be the first American city to deploy these technologies at scale at a district energy system here and help decarbonize Boston and Cambridge. I want to take this opportunity to reiterate our support for the governor's bold and effective climate agenda. I also wanted to publicly thank DOER for recognizing the role that district energy can play in meeting this moment. We're excited to explore the forthcoming straw proposal in terms of how we and every other district energy system across the Commonwealth can decarbonize and adhere to a pathway and a schedule that meets both the letter and the spirit of the stretch code. We here at Vicinity are confident that our decarbonized heat made with renewable electricity, we call it e-steam, aligns with the principles of the stretch code, and we look forward to a process within the forthcoming straw proposal that recognizes this. I'd also like to express our gratitude to the administration for acknowledging our role in decarbonizing, and we value the numerous discussions that we've had to date surrounding the specialized stretch energy code. We also look forward to future participation in the straw proposal, and we stress the need for an accelerated schedule in having these conversations. As an energy provider, we support Governor Healy's vision on building a thriving, sustainable Commonwealth. We're excited to be a partner in the effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Vicinity is dedicated to a clean energy future. We commend the DOER's dedication to addressing climate change. And just want to thank each of you. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Paul, for this opportunity. And thank you for letting us participate in today's hearing.
Thank you, Kevin. Next is Michael Punton.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Just real quick, I know you're not supposed to answer questions. Is this being recorded for your use or DOER use in capturing all these great comments?
Yes, it is. We're not, I said this at the start, but that was a while ago. We're not going to post the recording. We are going to use the recording so we can play back and make sure we capture everything that was said.
Excellent. Yeah, there's a
We are
handful
going
of
to post written comments though.
All right, thank you. There's a handful of folks that have obviously offered pro and con concerns on this. In my opinion, so that I'm a professional engineer, certified energy manager. I work HVAC design for commercial, residential, typically high-end residential, and some industrial applications. Seems to me that on the residential side, this really seems to be a feel-good measure and a drop in the bucket for the actual fossil fuel reduction. It seems like there's also a big disconnect between the energy and economics. So I'm working on a house in New York, so it doesn't need to follow the newest codes as far as stretch codes in Mass. But you have a 1990 home, cedar siding, 2x10 cathedral ceilings, 2x6 R19 walls, pretty darn nice house, a couple thousand square feet. And they're doing a 1,500 square foot addition. If we were in Mass, well, we'd rip off all that cedar siding, add foam on the outside, rip off all the shingles that are, you know, they were replaced 10 years ago, rip those off, put foam on the roof. When I did the heat load on the base case house, full edition, I was at 49,000 BTUs. After the best of the best, triple pane windows, replace all the windows in the house, all this work, I'm going to save $1,000 a year in energy consumption at the cost of what, 100 grand? Now you compare that to the 90 million BTU gas boiler that I'm working on at a local paper mill. 90 million BTUs. Well, divide that by 15,000 BTUs saved in this house to reduce fossil fuel consumption. If we were in Mass, what do we end up with? 6,000 homes. That 90 million BTU boiler represents a 15,000 BTU savings in 6,000 homes. There's a huge disconnect between asking a homeowner to spend tens of thousands of dollars pushing their payback out years and years and years. Never mind the fact that to go to electrification, air source heat pumps, our current natural gas price is about $1 a therm. It's 3 times to 4 times as much to heat with an air source heat pump at an electric rate of 30 cents, 35 cents in some areas. I have many homeowners that complain, something's wrong with my system. You should see my electric bill. Well, they forget that their base electric bill is 150 or 200 bucks on fossil fuels, but then switch them to natural gas, or excuse me, to all electric, and it's off the charts. It's way more than it was. Propane, it's about even. So, excuse me. Basically, I'm just thinking that, and I'm hearing folks say, larger homes, you can't build your home here. Go find a different town. I have one customer that's looking for new land in another town so that they can build the home they want to build without having to spend lots of extra money meeting with the code, complying with the code. So if you're listening to these comments, pump the brakes a little bit, get to real meaningful sliding scale like one of the other gentlemen mentioned. I'll just stop now, but thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Next is Andy Buccino.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks to everybody for really great comments. Really important points brought up kind of across the board. I just want to speak out first in favor of commissioners and inspectors. They're the front line along with HERS raters. And to be clear, I'm a HERS rater. I work for with Stevens and Company on Nantucket. Also represent the Northeast HERS Alliance. We do need to collaborate with our building commissioners and inspectors. We need to be really clear about what the rules and the codes stipulate so that we can all be on the same page and communicate that cleanly to our builders and our homeowners. A lot of the concern around the stretch transition has been around renovations. We just heard another comment along with Charlie Silva's earlier. I heard about your house, Charlie, on at a cocktail party the other night. I heard it's a great one, but I think what's important to recognize is that's exactly the type of thing and situation, and the last comment as well, where a variance is important. I think we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt relatively quickly when things become cost prohibitive on the renovation side. And that's the work that HERS raters do every day. So to be clear, I'd like to make sure that any variance pathway, and to the gentleman that spoke from Nantucket as well, with his comments on historic and other kind of pressure points around the renovation side, that the variance pathway is cleanly defined and supported so that we can move our buildings through that process as necessary. I don't know what that means as far as what those financial burdens are, but I'd like to, consider how we can do that better. I'm also encouraged by Rachel Roberts' comments on embodied carbon. We do have a national standard around materials carbon that's in the works right now. The technical committee is working on a final pass, and that will be out for public comment sometime later this summer. And we are doing some studies with a Mass CEC here in Massachusetts around 100 home study around embodied carbon. I feel like the embodied carbon component is powerful in relation to renovations, saving material rather than throwing it away. I think is the hallmark of a good common sense carbon principles. So I'm looking forward to that being implemented in the near future. And then lastly, I just wanted to suggest that on cost, please be cautious to think that the stretch code is driving costs up. The insulation values around the base code are very substantial, going to R60 in roofs and R30 on walls above grade. Those are not inexpensive systems. And there is plenty of evidence to suggest that we can do better and value engineer with a HERS rating, even at HERS 45 and 42. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Next, we have Michael Grant.
Ian, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Can you hear me appropriately?
Yes, we hear you well.
Thank you, Ian. My name is Michael Grant. I'm the inspector of buildings for the town of Wellesley, Massachusetts. Part of the big issue for me is the existing building provisions of the code. They are extremely confusing and are not user-friendly to the general end code users, the citizens of the Commonwealth. In response to one section of the code dealing with major alterations, I have taken the approach, because that language is so confusing, that I have submitted a code change proposal to the Commonwealth to change that language to then incorporate more of the numerous definitions that play into that code language and make it much clearer for what applies to commercial structures and residential structures. The code typically applies only to commercial buildings, would include the International Existing Building Code, and the residential portion of that code language would typically apply to 1 and 2 family dwellings. The residential provisions of the International Energy Conservation Code apply to R2, R3, R4, and townhouses. Well, R2 buildings are also hotel motels and other various structures that would fall more under the International Existing Building Code. So I currently have that proposal filed with the state. I'm waiting to hear back from them for a code change hearing proposal. But you also have other problems with large additions that you've heard in regards to the code. Addition is a increase in conditioned floor space by definition of the code, although your guidance document says that it's an alteration. So you have a conflict between your guidance document and the code. And again, my comrade in arms of an inspector stated that we are only enforced to enforce the code. We are only empowered to do that. We cannot your the conflict. So I think DOER needs to pull that conflict document back, review it, and make it line up better with the official code language. And I would also encourage DOER to take all these comments and, as expeditiously as possible, make changes to the code, because until that's officially changed in the code, us as building officials are incapable of changing the code unless we submit through code change proposals. So I would hope that the DOER would take the comments and move forward faster, quickly. And my final comment is, in my opinion, the DOER is flying in direct conflict with the Energy Code into the goals put forth by Governor Healy to make housing affordable and to help decrease the housing crisis in the Commonwealth by creating energy codes so difficult to comply with and raising costs so high that the general public cannot comply with. So I thank you for your time and my ability to give you comments.
Thank you, Michael. And just a reminder for everyone, if you want to submit written comments, that's super helpful to us. And you can submit code change proposals that way as well. You have language. Okay, I see 2 more hands up right now. So we will take those 2 and then see if there's anybody else. So next up is Anthony Carnevale.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you for your time in putting this session together. I mean, I think we've heard both sides enough. The important matter I'm dealing with is we get projects permitted under one code, and then they rapidly change and rapidly change and rapidly change to the point where the cost prohibits doing them. And what a housing crisis, as we have in the state, and as many have pointed out, just the previous speaker, where Governor Healy's trying to put that gap, get that gap in line, is making it very difficult. I wish that, or I hope that you would consider not only the gentleman from Nantucket who's having a hard time getting his rehabs to pass the code here, but us new construction folks that are having to absorb all this cost to the point where we're looking at an additional 50 units that were permitted in 2007, and we're looking at other ways to use the land instead of housing, because we can't absorb any more cost. It's ineffective. So I don't know if we're eligible for a waiver, if the waiver process is available, but I hope that you look at that closely, because it's only so much a consumer can put on their back and so much they can afford. And it's gotten to the point here in Western Mass where we can't compete anymore. It's again, we're looking at other ways to use the land and give up 50 additional permits. And I think that again would not run parallel with the housing crisis we have in our state. And I hope that it's looked at seriously, and I thank everyone for their time.
Thank you, Anthony. Okay, last on the list currently is Joe Marceau.
Hi, yes. I'm actually going to connect you to Russell Cole. He's been trying to reconnect, but he's having audio issues, so I have him on speaker here.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk. I have a couple of questions. One, sometimes this code is going for all electric and net zero, which I think was put in place to reduce our carbon output. However, sometimes you actually reduce your carbon output when you're using a gas-fired furnace, when the electric is not efficient enough to absorb the output of the power plant in order to run. It puts out more. I've seen that in heat pumps, and I've seen it in water heaters. Also, I am very concerned that if we switch over and we have a 50% mandate coming from the feds on car output going to EV, can our grid sustain that type of load? Now, will a 0 degree day with a lot of EVs and a lot of capable but inefficient heat pumps going to be more than we can handle? And have we compared those loads to what the utilities know they can produce? So, thank you.
Thank you, Russell, and thank you, Joe, for enabling Russell to speak there. Okay, it is now 4:37. I, at the moment, don't see any hands up. So I guess I'll take a last call for any public comments that anyone wants to provide. And while you're thinking about that, I'll just remind everyone that we're accepting written comments. Easiest way is to send an email to stretchcode@mass.gov. And we'll accept written comments until next Wednesday, April 3rd. Okay, I still don't see any hands. So I think we might call the meeting for now. And thank you again for the input. I know that it takes time out of your day. Thanks to everyone who's still here 2.5 hours on. Hopefully you found this helpful. We will be reviewing all the comments, and we have been working hard and thinking seriously about how to improve the code in Massachusetts, and we hope that you'll continue to help us to do that. Okay, thank you.